Traveling solo can be one of the most fun and rewarding experiences anyone could ever do for themselves, but it can also be one of the most challenging and nerve-wracking experiences anybody could put themselves through. Hi, my name is Spencer. I'm a travel, landscape, and astrophotographer based out of the beautiful island of Oahu in the beautiful state of Hawaii. But if you've been following this YouTube channel for a while, you know that I love to travel. I love to explore the national parks in the US mainland. I like to go inter-island and kind of just do a whole lot of traveling. And typically that travel involves going with somebody, whether that somebody be my girlfriend, Kylie, or my photography friends like Darwin, Lummy, Garrett, and Michelle. But sprinkled here and there, I take solo trips just because scheduling doesn't always line up. Desires for photography don't always line up. And I'm blessed to work as a nurse back home in Hawaii. So I only work 3 days a week. So if I stack my days and do like 4 days in a row, I can have a week off to travel and do whatever I want and then go back for another 4 days in a row and not like destroy myself in the process. But in this video, I wanted to explain the pros and cons of traveling by yourself so that you can either get inspired to do your own solo trips or deter you from traveling by yourself in the first place if you're not that type of person. All right, so what are the cons of solo traveling? Well, number one, it's anxiety inducing. The first time that I ever did any sort of solo traveling was on my Great Mainland trip of 2022. And I was kind of in between trips where I had spent a few days with one friend, but had a few days where my other friend wasn't going to arrive for the next leg of the trip. So there was a couple of days that I had to myself, and I spent a couple days in probably the worst place to spend it as a solo landscape photographer travel, which is San Francisco. Now looking back at it in hindsight, I think this is where a lot of my solo travel anxiety comes from, because my first ever experience was in an area with a lot of high crime rate against photographers, and you hear all these stories on the news about photographers getting robbed at gunpoint and getting followed home to get their camera gear stolen, and it's just an anxiety-inducing experience. And to have that be my first solo trip probably wasn't the best idea. But doing things by yourself, especially like kind of dangerous things sometimes, like hiking and going to the beach and traveling, driving late at night, going out to shoot Milky Way late at night, all of those things are kind of dangerous activities, but it's even amplified more so that you're doing it alone. And the whole fact that you're kind of out in Mother Nature pretty much by yourself and there's nobody to keep an eye on you. Especially here on the southern Oregon coast, where the entire landscape is literally cliffs that drop straight into the ocean below, probably not the smartest place to do solo traveling. Just all of that together can be very fear-inducing and anxiety-inducing. I still struggle with my travel anxiety and just my anxiety in general when it comes to this kind of stuff. And it's weird because I typically would identify myself as a really calm person. I work in the cardiac ICU where we see a lot of like very high intense situations, and during those situations, I typically don't panic as much, but something about just being alone, traveling by yourself. And I kind of brushed up on this in the San Francisco vlog, but I think that part of the anxiety that comes from traveling by yourself is the fact that you're trying to go out and do something that typically makes you feel safe, right? Or typically makes me feel safe, which is photography. I feel my most alive when I'm doing photography. But when that safe space is sort of interrupted by some anxiety-producing thoughts, whether it's physical safety, like how we were in San Francisco, or if it's like psychological safety, it's a process that I'm still struggling to work through and go through. So it's kind of like an overarching theme, and you'll see this concept of anxiety being brought up more and more as we get deeper and deeper into the pros and cons. The next con of solo traveling is that it's more expensive. Obviously, if you have less people to pay for the same amount of things, for a rental car, for lodging, any park fees and whatnot, the whole process of doing solo travel is going to be more expensive than if you were to bring along a friend or bring along a group of friends. And again, I'm very blessed with my day job working as a nurse that I'm able to afford to do solo trips here and there. Now, if I were to take every single trip every month and make that a solo trip, I don't think my wallet would be very happy. But if I sprinkle in a few solo trips here and there, you know, it's not horrible and it's relatively doable. But yeah, if you're somebody who is a little bit more budget conscious than I am, I would say, the financial side of solo traveling is not the best. But there are ways to save money out there. Like on this trip, I kind of don't really need the most fanciest and high-end hotels. So I kind of just found the cheapest Airbnb, the cheapest motels to stay in. Instead of doing traditional rental cars, I rented with Turo. It saved me a little bit of money here and there. So there are ways to kind of bring the costs down, of course. Another con of solo traveling, and this is a big con for me, is that all the driving is up to one person, and that one person is you. The one person is you. I hate driving. This probably stems back to my childhood because according to my mother, I used to be a very cranky baby. So to soothe me and make me go to sleep, they would just strap me in the back of the car and drive around and I would sleep. So now I think subconsciously my mind associates driving with sleeping. So every time I drive, I need to be like drinking something, blasting music, and it's just, I miss my chauffeur, Garrett. But yeah, if you are going to be doing solo traveling, a tip that I would try to give you to try to mitigate the stress on driving is to try to limit the amount of long drives you have to do. If you can find like a motel or a hotel or an Airbnb that's kind of close to your location, definitely try and book those instead of booking something that's maybe like an hour away, if at all possible. Basically, try to book your accommodations as close to your shooting locations as possible. That way you want to drive as far back and forth between locations. As well as when you're out in the field shooting, try to like make all of your attempts going out to shoot, make them all worth it. So in this case, I probably should have tried to come here a little bit earlier to shoot Milky Way and just kind of wait for the sun to rise. But now that I'm thinking about it, it's taking the sun really long to come up, so I think I'm gonna break up my two shoots tomorrow. But you get what I'm saying. Try to make the most of every time you go out. Try to squeeze a sunset and a Milky Way, or a Milky Way and a sunrise, yada yada yada. And then like if you are feeling tired after a shoot, you can always sleep in the car. So just in case I needed to, I brought like my sleeping bag, I brought extra clothes, I kept those in the car. That way, if I'm like pooped and I'm like not up to doing a long drive, I can just drop the seats, roll up in my sleeping bag, take a nap for a little while. So those are some ways that I kind of mitigate the fatigue that I usually get from traveling, especially when I'm by myself. All right, so the last con that I have for you guys is the con that probably prompted me to make this whole entire video in the first place, is the fact that when you're traveling solo, all the decisions are made up to you. The small ones all the way to the big ones. And sometimes those choices that you have to make can really impact the outcome of your entire trip. Now, I'm usually not the best decision maker. I'm kind of just more of like a go with the flow type of person. I'm not one to be like, oh yeah, let's do this and do that. Especially when we're in a group, I'm always like, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. I kind of just go with the flow. But this kind of goes back to the anxiety thing. Even the small decisions like where to eat, what time to wake up, what time to sleep and all that, all of those decisions can be overwhelming to somebody who's like used to going out and traveling with a group or shooting with a group. It's one of those things where each decision kind of impacts the trip moving forward, and the only person to make the decision is yourself. All right, so now I'm going to go into what happened within the past 24 hours. So the original plan for this trip, which we're pretty much sticking to, was to shoot Mount Hood for a couple days, to shoot the Alpine Glow, to shoot the Milky Way for a few days, and we did accomplish that. We did a pretty good job, I think. Basically, my Delta flight, this is all with Delta, all of my issues with this trip have been with Delta. Usually I have problems with Hawaiian, but Delta is giving me problems too. But inevitably, the more you travel, the more problems you're gonna have with an airline. So this is no means like a bash Delta video or complaining about Delta. These things are just bound to happen with any airline when you're traveling. But there was a delay in my first flight from Portland to Seattle, and that was a connecting flight from Seattle to Medford. So there was a delay on the first flight, so I missed the second flight, right? And when I went up to talk to the lady at the counter, or the employee at the counter, they basically gave me two options. They said they can either rebook me on the later flight at 5 o'clock. I was originally supposed to leave at 10 in the morning, but the next available flight to Medford was 5 o'clock. So, that was option number one. Or option number two is they could just offer me a full refund for my Medford flight. And I figured in my mind, the refund sounds pretty good. You usually don't get refunds from airlines. Usually they give you like travel credit and whatnot. So in my mind, I initially went, I'll take the refund. I will go pick up my checked bag from the carousel, and I'll just rebook another flight that's a little bit earlier, because 5 o'clock seems super late and I wanted to shoot sunset. I was so fixated on shooting sunset. So I figured that I could probably just take a quick Southwest or JetBlue or one of those flights from Seattle to Medford. But there were no flights available. I didn't even bother looking to see if there were any cheaper flights available before I canceled my ticket from Delta. And that ticket would have been transferable to the 5 o'clock flight that I ended up paying for anyways, because there was no other flight to take besides that expensive Delta flight at 5 p.m. So lesson learned, maybe look at alternative flights before you cancel your booking in the first place, especially if you have 5 hours to wait. You could totally shop around and wait. But that was a decision that monumentally impacted the trip, because as I was, eventually I got on my 5 p.m. flight, I drove over here, but as I was driving from Medford down to Brookings, oh my God, there was this beautiful, beautiful sunset, and I was kicking myself because I knew that I would have caught that sunset, number one, if I made my flight. I guess Delta's partially to blame for that one. I ended up paying an extra, I guess, $200 for a flight that I should have just stuck with to begin with. Usually these decisions are big group discussions when you're traveling with a group, or if you're traveling with a partner, you kind of discuss things, you can talk things through. But when you're traveling by yourself, you don't have that other person to talk to. So it's kind of just your inner monologue going over and over. And because I have like this already high energy and high anxious brain going on in my mind, I don't always think things through as best as I should. So if you are solo traveling, or if you are planning on solo traveling, even if the situation is stressful, like missing your flight is stressful, and trying to rush around to trying to get to a location for sunset is stressful, like the whole ordeal is stressful. It's always important to take a deep breath, relax, and really kind of talk things through with yourself, figure out what the best decision is to make at that time, and don't just willy-nilly pull the trigger at what shiny new thing is possibly on the horizon. and don't let your kind of inner anxiety and inner monologue take over to rush you into a decision that was rushed and is probably not the best decision. But at the same time, and this is kind of transitioning into the pros of solo traveling, the fact that I made one bad decision, the only person that I was affected by that decision was me. If I made that decision with a group or with Kylie, I would have been hearing it from both of them as well as Kylie. So the stupid decisions only impact you, which is great, because it kind of, I guess, takes the pressure off of you in some ways, because you're kind of free to make your own decisions, you're free to decide what to do, and if you do end up making a bad decision, it's not the end of the world. We missed one sunset, we still got here in time, we still got a couple of nights here where we can shoot Milky Way, so all hope is not lost and this trip is not ruined. But that one bad decision only impacted me, and usually when you're solo traveling, all the decisions, good and bad, they only impact one person, and that one person is you. After our first beautiful sunset that was cloudless here on the coast, I attempted to return to the same beach for Milky Way, but was unfortunately clouded out by the marine layer. If I was traveling with somebody else, I would have felt bad that the conditions didn't align, but because I was by myself, I didn't get too invested in the overall outcome. I simply just packed up my stuff and went home. But yeah, solo traveling isn't all bad, and despite the anxiety and the pressure that's put on you when you're traveling by yourself, because you're by yourself, you're given so much more freedom. There isn't anybody to kind of talk things through with. There isn't anybody to question your decisions, even if your decisions are pretty questionable like they are today. Like, clearly I made the wrong decision to come this early for sunrise and try to get this shot. In fact, I'm even thinking about giving up on this shot because I don't think the light's gonna come out anytime soon. Basically, when you're doing solo travel, you're free to do whatever your heart desires, and there's nobody that you have to worry about. There isn't anybody that you basically only have to worry about yourself. And you know, that's a very freeing experience for somebody who's always constantly trying to plan and worry about what hikes we can do, what hikes we can't do based off of the experience level of the party that's involved. Having the ability to say, I'm just gonna go do X, or I'm just gonna go and do Y, and just kind of going with the flow and doing whatever our heart desires it's a very freeing experience. But yeah, freedom, I would say, is definitely the biggest draw for solo travel. So if you don't like to plan things with other people, or if you're somebody who just wants to go, if you're that type of person, or if you're somebody who wants to also take it easy on your trip and maybe do one shoot here and there but relax the rest of the time, it's totally up to you, because the only person that your plans affect are yourself. Having the freedom to explore rather than sticking together with a group can be a blessing sometimes. For my final sunset here on the Oregon coast, I didn't know quite where to shoot. I wandered down this trail by myself that certainly no one in their right minds would go down, and ended up standing on the edge of this cliff. Again, against better judgment. I spent a few hours just watching the waves crash below, and the clouds eventually did roll in, and I was blessed with this amazing sunset. And what made it even better was that I had this whole entire place to myself, which leads me to my next point. Sharing a beautiful experience out in nature with somebody else can be rewarding, but as a landscape photographer, being able to capture the beauty of Mother Nature with nobody except your 3 cameras and tripods is a valuable skill to have. Not everybody has the courage and determination to venture out into the elements, subdue that anxiety about what could go wrong, and take a chance to experience something magical. I didn't let my prior night's experience discourage me from chasing the Milky Way again the following night, and after a roller coaster of emotions battling the marine layer, I finally got an okay shot of the Milky Way rising over this beach. Ideally, I'd like the core a little bit higher and a little bit more to the right over the sea stacks, but the marine layer eventually did roll in all the way to sock out the night sky. But I was grateful to end this trip off on a somewhat good note, and at least I didn't get totally skunked. At the end of the day, you have to ask yourself when you're traveling solo, is the experience of being in a particular spot, does being there and doing whatever activity it is, for me it's doing landscape and astrophotography, is the shots that I'm going to take going to outweigh all the cons? And decide for yourself whether or not solo traveling is right for you. But yeah, that's gonna about do it for this video. Hit that like button, comment below, and subscribe if you aren't ready. if you like this travel, vacation, a little bit of edumacation content. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.